Delighted to be joined by Paul Martin and James Gay-Rees from Box to Box Films, of course, both producers of Formula One Drive to Survive, season 4 of which is to be released on Netflix on Friday, March the 11th. Thanks to both of you lads for taking the time to speak to us about this new season. And speaking of which, could either of you have imagined an end to the season as dramatic as the one which played out before our eyes in Abu Dhabi back on December 12th? And maybe start with you, Paul.
No, basically, despite rumors that we wrote it, I think we were both, I think we both, or, I speak for myself, we just watched it with, in kind of awe of what was kind of unfolding. And no, we could never have imagined it, or, begun to imagine it. It was such an extraordinary finish to an extraordinary season that I think it was like, we were in the edit and we we're trying to edit that episode and in all the, in everything that went on in Abu Dhabi, I think everyone lost sight of what a crazy race Saudi Arabia had been the week before. So yeah, I think the whole end to the season was just crazy and very fortunate to be making the show this year.
For sure. I mean, from your perspective, James, I guess even in the trailer, Pierre Gasly, I think, makes the quote, "What are we going to talk about this year?" Which tongue in cheek, of course. But like, were you thinking over the course of even the first 3 quarters of that race in Abu Dhabi or even a little bit more, Hamilton's going to win this quite easily. He's going to win the championship. Maybe a bit of an anticlimax. We're not going to get that final last battle between him and Max. What was going through your head before that final battle occurred in Abu Dhabi?
Well, it'd been such a sort of like a sort of seesaw, hadn't it? Because, Max had pulled away, then Hamilton has slowly reeled him in. So, I think the season kind of chopped and changed so much. So I think, listen, it would have been an immensely gratifying season even without that final denouement because there'd been so much action. I mean, the 2 races prior to Abu Dhabi were pretty insane. And by anybody's standards. So no, I think, listen, that was just the kind of like, the madness that tipped over the line, listen, great drama for everybody concerned, I suppose, unless you're a Mercedes team member. But a challenge for us to kind of basically deal with because we had very little time to edit those episodes, but we knew that there'd be massive scrutiny on those episodes. So, very, very, very happy with the way those last 2 episodes have turned out because they're like rocket fuel.
Of course. And I guess this question for either of you, like in terms of cinematography, when you think about those last few laps, and look, the television pictures, of course, were excellent that we all saw live. But is it tough to get that point of difference when you're then trying to show everyone the same images that they saw on television, the same battle they saw on television, but give it a kind of almost like an aerial dogfight kind of vibe? I think Lewis Hamilton used the phrase "constant warfare" in the trailer for this season as well. So can it be tough to get that point of difference in cinematography between what we see on the television and then what we see in Drive to Survive?
I think it's like we're lucky that as well as stuff that we shoot over a race weekend, we have access to the numerous cameras that Formula One have at an event, and obviously the broadcast is a pretty constant kind of pattern of cameras and camera shots, but they do film those races from every conceivable angle, and so even from day one on Drive to Survive, it was. I think one of those points of difference is that we were able to dive into that footage and edit the races in a completely different way from broadcast, which then gives you, which we can do it in a much more dramatic style than they could possibly do on the broadcast.
Like we've even heard for next year, there'll be these the FIA discussions, I guess, with the team principals. Michael Massey, I know, has been stepped aside or moved aside or whatever you might call it. But these discussions that we hear on television between the team principals and the FIA will no longer be there. Does that affect you guys? I presume you'll still have access anyway, given that the series is released after the fact.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. We're still, I think, AC season 5 hasn't been confirmed yet, but I think also just the fallout from the whole affair, I think, is still slightly ongoing. So we'll just have to see how the dust settles and see what we've got to, what's at our disposal to use come next year, if we do next year. But I think that one thing you can guarantee is that there'll be more than enough content to use. And, obviously we'll film our own stuff if it happens.
Absolutely. Like I often think about the element of luck and I guess the number of dramatic incidents that seem to happen in number of seasons. Like we had the crazy episode, I think it was the penultimate episode of season 3, Man on Fire, when we saw the Romain Grosjean crash, and I think that highlights how dramatic a sport it is when you see how many incidents there is to cover from this season alone. Like, this is probably your most action-packed season of the series, it's fair to say.
I think it was different. I think that, that Drive to Survive had never necessarily been about the championship battle, because there hadn't really necessarily been one for kind of 4 years. And I think this year, because it was such a compelling, fight between Max and Lewis, the temptation actually was to, the challenge with that was, that you were always drawn to that. Every time we talked about, okay, well, let's, should we go back to Mercedes and Red Bull, or should we, so we had to kind of keep very true to the spirit of Drive to Survive, which is not necessarily about the winners of kind of every race and the winners of the championship. It's about other storytelling. It's about, what's going on with Haas, what's going on with, Alpine, what's going on with, what's happening with, Yuki and those guys. So, it was a unique season, because of that. And because we had something that we'd never had before, which was a genuine championship fight that went to the last lap of the last race.
Like, we talk a lot here and Off the Ball about how the show has certainly increased interest in Formula One, anecdotally. And like, have you guys noticed that yourselves, even from the driver's perspective? I guess, as you mentioned there, like, you cover a lot of the smaller quote unquote teams, like Haas, like Alpine, like these teams that mightn't have the money of Red Bull and Mercedes. So maybe all 20 drivers on the grid now are recognizable if they walk into a supermarket, whereas, 5-10 years ago, that mightn't have been the case. So are you guys anecdotally noticing that increased interest in the sport as a result of the show?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, it's no secret that the ratings, on terrestrial, on Sky rather, have gone up. And I think that, obviously America has a kind of like, a big interest in the sport now, and is adding new Grand Prix all the time to the calendar. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's been transformative in that respect. I think the audience is getting younger, from what we understand, which is obviously great, because at the end of the day, all these different sports are competing for the same eyeballs, aren't they? So they're trying to get younger viewers and stay with them and grow with them. And I think that it, due to the nature of the show, it has attracted a younger audience away from its traditional kind of core, maybe middle-aged male audience, So that's a great thing. And I think, at the end of the day, we're just a couple of guys trying to make a decent TV show. And, the fact that people will respond to it is fantastic, because we work really hard at the show. And so to get this sense that a lot of people are watching it is obviously very gratifying, because it's a visual medium and you want people to see it. But it's good for the sport, if it's good for the sport, it's good for us. And if it's good for us, it's good. Do you know what I mean? It's a virtuous circle in a way. So we're just happy that it's connected with such a wide audience.
I mentioned luck there a minute ago. Like, I think I'm right in saying in that Monza, you were, I guess you have to focus on a particular team for certain races. And in Monza, you happened to be with McLaren for that wonderful 1-2 from Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. So is it now the case that teams want Netflix to be in with them for a race? Are you seen as a good luck charm in some ways?
I think it depends, what weekend it is. I've heard there's a Netflix curse. I've heard that we're a good luck charm. I heard everything, I mean, I think, it's just a dramatic sport. It's just a sport that's full of drama. So, if you're around the teams, drama's going to happen. And I think, that, all that stuff about the curse and stuff is firmly tongue in cheek, I think. But
I know, but it was basically because when we followed Mercedes at Hockenheim, was it season 2 or 3?
Season 2,
Season 2, and they had their worst race in 5 years. So it's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, but listen, it's a sport with inherent drama, everywhere. And that's why the show's so great to make and so great to be involved in, because it doesn't, sometimes we get lucky and sometimes we kind of don't, and we can't be everywhere and we can't be with every team at every race. And, touch wood, we've sort of had more luck than not. And, we seem to have a good habit of being in the right place at the right time.
For sure. I mean, it's made me fall in love with Günther Steiner and Daniel Ricciardo in particular. Very finally, lads, a quick fire one. For the two of you, favorite driver, favorite team principal, and favorite circuit.
Ooh, don't know if we can go.
Controversial.
We can go on record as saying who our favorites are, because we're seeing them all later on tonight, so we'll get in trouble. But don't know. I mean, it's a tricky one to answer.
Tricky.
You're getting in trouble regardless of.
It's tricky. I mean, listen, Günther. Everyone loves Günther, and we're the same. And he's been, to see him you know, kind of step into kind of the spotlight of Formula One, a sport that he'd been in for, you know, 20 years. And, you know, by his own admission, you know, no one even looked twice at him. And, you know, I remember after the season 1 came out and he came up to us and said, you know, he'd been in a restaurant in Australia, in Sydney. And so I was like, it's you, isn't it? It's you. And he's like, yeah, it's me. It's me. And he's like, no, you're the guy. You're the guy from that show. And he's like, yeah. He's like, never happened to him in 20 years. And so, you know, that's kind of what it's about. And so I think, you know, I think it's no secret that we do have a soft spot for Gunter, because he's just been a great character for the show.
I'm a closet Charles Leclerc fan, and I want to marry my daughter, so I'm going to try and make that happen. And I think we want to do more with him next year, if we do next year. So yeah, more Charles Leclerc, please.
Yeah, and I think my favorite circuit is Sao Paulo, but that's more for the nights out than the actual racing.
It's a good enough reason. I can understand that. Listen, lads, been great with your time. Paul Martin, James Gay-Rees, producers of Formula One Drive to Survive. A reminder for people, season 4 released on Netflix Friday, March 11th. Lads, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.